I, 30F, live in a fantasy world, married to 30M. I have always had an active imagination and a rich fantasy life. It helps that I like to write and I'm able to bring a lot of that to my stories. But I also have a rich fantasy life that I keep to myself as sort of an escape from reality. My therapist wants me to unpack this a little and distance myself from it. And I guess I'm looking for a little perspective. For background, I've been married for 5 years and together 12. My husband is a good man, kind and loving. We have one child, 4F. We both work full-time, and we have dates and time together. In many ways I'm satisfied. But at the core, my husband and I are different people. He is not passionate and not interested in the same things I am for the most part. I also have little interest in his hobbies. So we both have inner lives that are separate from the other. I'll make up stories to get myself through the day. Like I'll see a stranger at the library and I imagine a meeting of the mind's relationship with this complete stranger. Or I'll leave home at night and go for drives and listen to romantic songs and put myself in the lyrics. I thumb through travel websites and imagine entire lives in those places. My therapist has been gently telling me that this might be unhealthy behavior, and that I should give more thought to being present in the world. Anyone else dealing with a similar dilemma? Any advice? Too long didn't read. Married woman with stable married life, no real issues except imagination. Has your therapist mentioned, or have you yourself looked into maladaptive daydreaming? This might be unhealthy because it is keeping you from actually feeling your dissatisfaction with your life and acting on it. Instead of daydreaming about a stranger, what about planning a romantic date with your husband? Instead of daydreaming about a life abroad, what about making a plan and budget to visit somewhere? Everyone does the things you are doing. But if you do them too much, you're blocking your own way. In my opinion, it sounds like you're escaping into your fantasies so you can avoid confronting the uncomfortable reality in your life. You aren't satisfied in your marriage. Your fantasies seem to revolve around an idealized version of romance. Meanwhile, you say you have little in common with your husband, that your sex life is lacking, that you can't have fun and adventure while having a stable life and child, not true BTW, and that your therapist doesn't understand that you don't have control over these things. Your therapist understands exactly how much control you have, control over your own actions, and no one else's. And with this control over your own actions, instead of confronting these issues head-on, it seems like you're avoiding them completely because you get just enough satisfaction out of your fantasies to not completely lose your mind. Have you actually spoken to your husband about your relationship? How does he feel about your sex life? How has your relationship changed since your child was born, and how does that make you feel? Instead of daydreaming about these escapist fantasies, why don't you try putting some of that brain power to work thinking about how you can move forward in your relationship with your husband? Imagine what you might say to him and how he might react. Use it to prepare you for actually talking to him for real. If you don't address these problems, they aren't going to go away. This is your one and only life. You deserve to feel happy and loved. Don't waste your time escaping the real world when you could be spending that time making it better. I think you should probably focus on what your therapist says. Seeking outside opinion on a topic that you're covering in therapy with a professional is rarely going to be helpful in the long run. We don't know you, we don't know the extent of this behavior, we aren't trained in dealing with this kind of thing. Stick to what your therapist says. The fact that you came to strangers on the internet for a second opinion is a pretty good indication that this is in fact an issue. I would ask yourself how much time you spend fantasizing in a given day. Is it every day? Is it several hours a day? I would also ask yourself if this fantasizing is stopping you from doing things that could make your actual lived experience better. If you took the time and energy you spend fantasizing and invested it in other ways, what could you get? Could you get a deeper relationship with your husband? Could you gain more satisfaction from pursuing another hobby with that time? Everyone fantasizes some. I have done it more in times of my life where I was mostly unhappy. I did a lot of fantasizing in high school, which was a time where I felt really disconnected from other people. I fantasized a lot about having romance in my life. In college I fantasized about living a totally different lifestyle and having comforts that I didn't have, and not having the stresses of hard schoolwork. These days I don't spend much time fantasizing about a different life because I'm happier in the life I am in. Also, I am in treatment for my anxiety and depression now, so my mental health is better. Maybe your experience is different and it's not something you do just because you're unhappy. But for me, I feel like it's something that doesn't really give satisfaction, and it can distract you from actually doing something to change the circumstances that make you unhappy. Your therapist probably has a good reason for giving this advice, but she also isn't inside your head. This comment is just all my perspective and stuff to think about. There is nothing inherently wrong with having a rich fantasy life, and it doesn't have to be taken away from your real life. My 19M sister, 21F, is having an affair with our married neighbor, late 20s M. Wondering if I should say something or mind my own business. I guess the title kind of tells you the gist of it. We both are at university and live at home with our dad and our stepmom. I get along well with my sister but aren't super close or anything. Must have been going on a long time with this guy. They are 100% having an affair. I have seen them making out through his windows. Wasn't perving, just caught my eye when I was in my garden. My sister must have covered her tracks well so far, but she seems not to have realized that I am still doing a lot of my classes at home due to COVID. I don't like it and it's morally wrong, but I also just don't want to get involved or interfere. Should I tell my parents and let them handle it? I really dunno. I am leaning towards saying nothing at the moment, but I keep changing my mind. Too long didn't read. My sister is having an affair with the married guy next door. She doesn't know I know. No idea what to do. If you don't tell the husband, you are complicit in the affair. At that point you're not much better than your sister. Okay, that's a little dramatic, lol. If someone was cheating on you, would you appreciate being told? Send an anonymous message to the neighbor's spouse. They're not being discreet if you found out. Chances are, it's not impossible that someone else might know too. You can tell anonymously if it bothers you. Ignore posters saying you'd be blowing up a family. You wouldn't be. A husband who made the decision to cheat did. Your sister is involved, but she's not the family being blown up. I've been cheated on. Nobody told me. It sucked when I learned they knew the whole time. Sucked even more when his parting gift was antibiotic resistant. Sucked even more when I caught him myself. I wish someone told me and made the blow fall differently. But that's just one way to look at it. Jesus, all these comments saying do nothing. Good to know this many people have no issue with being a shitty person. Tell the wife. Your sister is a shitty person who gives a fuck if she's mad at you. Be the bigger man and don't be a coward that could have stopped something bad but instead did nothing. I don't know what to expect for my 23F date with my best friend, 23M, and I don't feel ready for it. My 23F best friend, 23M, of 7 years told me that he had feelings for me and asked if I would be okay with exploring those feelings if I felt the same way. He had been acting weird for the past few weeks, so I kinda had an inkling this was coming, so I at least had a response kind of planned out. I was upfront about the fact that I didn't want to ruin our friendship, but Connor, not his real name obviously, made some good points, basically saying that dating might make us even closer and that if we date we'll probably be less likely to drift apart after college. This was in response to me admitting that us drifting apart was one of my fears. He also rightly pointed out that even if things didn't work out we could remain friends because we're both pretty level-headed and neither of us are likely to drop the other person as a friend over a petty breakup. I was talked into agreeing with him because everything he said was so logical, but I'm still unsure. I never saw myself dating Connor. I always thought he was cute but more in an awe, he's gonna make some nice girl so happy one day. type of way. I guess I never thought that girl would be me. I feel like our chances of keeping the friendship the same as before was already ruined the minute he said he wanted to be more than friends, so I felt like had no choice but to at least try a couple of dates with him. In my view, I could either reject him and lose him forever if he couldn't stand being around me anymore, or I could agree to date and salvage at least a fraction of what we had. He was so happy when I said yes, and it made me really happy to see him smile and knowing how excited he was. I'm scared of so many things. I'm scared that he'll kiss me on the date and I'll enjoy it and then our whole lives will change. I'm also scared that I won't have fun on the date because it'll feel different than our old friendship hangouts. And I'm scared that he won't enjoy it, but I'm even more scared that he will enjoy it. I haven't been able to sleep properly ever since he told me. Last night I stayed up all night and ate peanut butter straight out of the jar just to distract myself from thinking about what will happen on the date. I've been psyching myself out on what to wear and whether to get made up like I would for any other guy. It feels weird asking my other friends for advice about boy stuff when normally I would just go to Connor about stuff like this. I just wish we could go back to how things were before he dropped that bombshell. We were both so happy and comfortable as friends, and now I can feel how nervous we are when we're around each other, and it sucks. In an ideal world we will come back from the date and laugh about it and just agree to be friends again, but I don't think that's realistic. I'm already nostalgic about all the times we spent hanging out in our hometown and just enjoying the friendship, and now everything's gonna be so different and it's making me panic so much. I don't even know where he's taking me on the date since he wants it to be a surprise, and it's just giving me ridiculous anxiety not knowing. Too long didn't read. Going on a date with my best friend after he told me that we'd be good together. I'm not so convinced and I'm nervous. Advice appreciated. Well, I married my best friend, been together almost 14 years now, married for 10.5. The first date was a little weird, so we took the pressure off and instead of dinner or something fancy we just went for drinks and then grabbed a sandwich at a hole-in-the-wall place. Just doing natural friend stuff took the pressure off and it became easy to slip into holding hands, cuddling up in the booth, etc. My advice is to not do something that's a complete 180 of your usual fun stuff to do on a day/night out. Be in a comfortable situation and the rest should flow naturally. You sound like you're not into him. Don't go on a date if you don't want to date him. People don't end up in love because it logically makes sense. They do it because they have romantic feelings and are compatible and make it work out. I'd why people are encouraging you. It sounds like this is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. How does the idea of doing romantic things with him make you feel? Excited, anxious, or grossed out? What about kissing, making out, fooling around, etc.? Have you ever fantasized about him before? A relationship requires physical attraction. If that's not there, this won't work. How does the idea of doing romantic things with him make you feel? Excited, anxious, or grossed out? Not grossed out. More anxious than excited. Have you ever fantasized about him before? Not until this week. No. A relationship requires physical attraction. If that's not there, this won't work. He's attractive, but that's not the issue. A friendship dynamic has been one of the highlights of my life, and it would be a shame if it changed. Too much emo. I don't want him to be just another boyfriend who I date for a little bit and then we split up and never talk again. Tell him that you're anxious about it and don't want the date to be a surprise. He probably wants to make it a surprise because he thinks that's romantic and you'll like it. So if it's making you miserable, tell him that. It sounds like he cares about you and wouldn't want to be making you miserable. Big red flag here is I was talked into agreeing with him because everything he said was so logical. That doesn't sound healthy. If you don't want to date him, then just say no. You don't need an argument for why. On the other hand, I'm scared that he'll kiss me on the date and I'll enjoy it. Makes it sound like maybe you do want to date him. Either way, spend some time with your feelings and say yes or no based on what you want rather than based on his arguments or elaborate what-if scenarios. Tell him that you're anxious about it and don't want the date to be a surprise. Think I'm gonna do this. Thanks.